The Biden inaugural is just days away. How must it feel to be an incoming chief executive with an ambitious agenda, succeeding a predecessor from the other party? Let's ask someone who knows. Jim Douglas served 4 terms as governor of Vermont, succeeding Howard Dean, and having previously served as state treasurer and Vermont secretary of state and in the state legislature right out of college. Jim is a great trivia question, having earned more votes than any other Vermonter in history. And I saw his political career begin when we voted him a senior class president, class of 1968, East Longmeadow High School. Jim, welcome to the Big Picture.
Well, great to be with you, Holland. Thanks for those kind words.
In 2009, you were the first governor to meet in the White House with just inaugurated President Obama. Describe that moment and the very young-looking man you met not even 2 weeks into his presidency.
Well, it was a real honor to be the first governor to have a one-on-one meeting with President Obama just about a week and a half after he assumed office in 2009. I'd met him once before, right after the election a few months earlier. He asked to meet with all the governors, and so we convened on very short notice, 50 of us, in Philadelphia to meet with the new president and the new vice president, Joe Biden. So we had an opportunity to spend some time discussing our concerns then. I was in Washington for another purpose, and I asked to meet with the White House Intergovernmental Affairs team, and to my surprise, they said, well, we'd like you to meet with the president. So I said, why not? And there's an iconic photo of the president and me moving furniture in the Oval Office. It was on display a little later at the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. And get this, Holland, it was deemed one of the top 10 presidential photos of all time.
Now that is immortality. Hey, as Joe Biden takes office, this virus has the USA, indeed the world, in crisis. And as a new governor, you too had your work cut out for you. In your first inaugural address, you acknowledged an extended economic slowdown, which had indiscriminately cast thousands of Vermonters into unemployment, and you described a cloud of uncertainty that lingers on the horizon as our economy teeters precariously between recession and recovery. And you asked everyone to pitch in, noting that we have responded to our greatest challenges not by putting aside our differences, but by building on our common understandings. Seeking that common understanding is what Vermont founders called civic virtue. After the last 4 years, indeed, after the last 4 weeks, civic virtue seems quaint. How do you figure President Biden's chances are of selling what unites us is greater than what divides us?
He certainly has his work cut out for him. This is a deeper recession than I faced in 2003, although it seemed pretty serious at the time. He's indicated that he wants to work across the aisle with Republicans. He'll certainly have to do that. Even though the Democrats have slim majorities in both houses of Congress, they're not overwhelming, and there are a few independent-minded people there who can't be taken for granted. So I hope that he'll be able to do that. I think he has the capacity to do so. He's been in Washington for nearly half a century. He'll need to tackle the pandemic first and foremost, but I hope particularly early on, when new leaders often have what's known as a honeymoon, he'll have a chance to make some other progress too.
Well, the flip side of that honeymoon is something that even when the incumbent administration is more welcoming than Trump has been to Biden, there's always a learning curve. Our colleague Jesse Ventura says you only know what you know when you get elected, and then when you get in there, you kick over rocks and things crawl out. Two-part question, Jim, having served as treasurer and secretary of state, and in the legislature, did that spare you unpleasant surprises? And does Joe Biden's 8 years as VP give him a leg up on the learning curve?
Oh, it clearly does. You noted my career in your introductory remarks. And in addition to that, Holland, I served as executive assistant to a governor in the late 70s and early 80s. So I felt very well prepared to assume that responsibility in 2003, and really nothing surprised me. I think the new president will find similarly that his 8 years in the White House, his 36 years in the U.S. Senate before that will give him a real insight into what's going on in Washington that someone else may not have. For example, his predecessor. President Trump is the first president in our history with no experience in government, either civilian or military, and some might say that that has been a disadvantage for him. So I think President Biden will be just fine.
We are talking chief executive transition with the retired four-term Vermont Governor Jim Douglas. One of the, I think, 2 states where the governor's term is 2 years. Jim, how loud is that ticking sound in the background to the extent that you feel as though you're constantly running for re-election? And do you think the sheer actuarial unlikeliness of a second Biden term could actually be an advantage?
Well, 2-year terms are quite brief. You're exactly right. Vermont and New Hampshire are the only 2 that still have them. Believe it or not, in Vermont, until 1870, we had 1-year terms. And when I proposed to the legislature that we go to 4, they said, yeah, well, you keep talking about that, we'll put you back at 1. But it's a brief time. We always have to think about the next election. The good news is, in Vermont, very few incumbents have been defeated for re-election, only a couple in the last century. So Vermonters generally stick with the people they put in office. Our current governor, Phil Scott, won re-election this fall overwhelmingly without much of a campaign at all because of the outstanding leadership he's provided during the pandemic. Will President Biden seek re-election when he's 82? I don't know. You and I have to hope that 80 is the new 60, right? So maybe he will, but he might not. And at least one president, Rutherford Hayes, said early in his tenure, I'm only going to serve 1 term. I would think that President Biden would wait a while before making that determination. So we'll see, but he's got a lot of work on his plate during this 4-year term.
We were speaking with retired Vermont Governor Jim Douglas, whom I have known since childhood, and because of the English alphabet, Jim and I sat next to each other in 7th grade homeroom where the principal did not come on the PA system and make an announcement. But we learned that President Kennedy had been shot later that afternoon on the school bus. The school bus was then social media. Back to the Future, Facebook and Twitter have been controversial lately. Parler has been shut down. Yet social media does afford direct contact between the governor, a president, and those represented, and vice versa. Jim, how does it all net out? Is social media a net plus or minus?
I don't know that I can answer that yet, Holland. That's an interesting new development. In my last campaign in 2008, it was the first time I had a Facebook page, and I'll admit to you that my staff managed it most of the time. So I haven't had that much experience with it, but it's both a blessing and a curse, I think. It gives people an opportunity to communicate directly and widely and instantly, but it also can stir up a lot of mischief and offer information that isn't true. I worry about the shutdowns we've seen, though, recently. One of the hallmarks of our democracy is the First Amendment, the right to speak, the right to have our ideas heard and challenged and debated. And I think these companies need to be very careful about shutting down anyone who uses their platforms. There's an old saying that the best antidote to free speech you don't like is more free speech, not trying to block it.
Yeah, and once again, technology leaps ahead of public policy. During his years of job hopping, basketball coach Rick Pitino says a new coach has to win and win quickly. If you had Joe Biden's ear, other than the obvious urgency of corralling the pandemic, I've got about a minute left. What would you urge him to tackle? Is infrastructure the obvious job-creating FDR 2.0, or would it be something else?
Well, it might be that, but I'd offer a couple of additional suggestions. I think this is a great opportunity for him to tackle some challenges that have been confronting our country for a long time. During the pandemic, we've amassed $7 trillion of additional debt, and it's going to keep going up for at least the near term. If he can begin to bend the curve on that, that would be a tremendous contribution to our kids' and our grandkids' future. And secondly, another long-term problem is the solvency of our Social Security fund and Medicare. He's already talked about the possibility of a fix there, and I think if he can do that through a balanced approach of raising the retirement age, increasing the revenues, I think that would be a tremendous accomplishment too. So I hope he'll think big, act big, and perhaps be able to get some wins under his belt.
From your lips, Governor Jim Douglas, thank you for stepping into the big picture.